Clark, and you're listening to the 9 to 5 Faith podcast.
Well, welcome, Eden. I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. Happy Thursday, almost weekend, all good. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do? And
yeah, absolutely. So I am in digital marketing. So my education was actually in professional writing, and that kind of tossed me into the communications world. People always find it funny because I work in manufacturing now, but in college I actually studied medieval studies as my minor. So it's like I went from like archaic documentation to robotics.
But like that's so cool. Hold on. We're gonna pause there. What were you gonna do with, what is it, medieval history?
Medieval studies. Yeah. My original plan was to work for a year after college and then go for a PhD. And then I ended up loving the industry, manufacturing, like so much that I never left. So here I am. And I'm just like,
that's
that's
so cool though. Yeah. You were the first person I have ever met who studied
minored in medieval stuff. Yeah, people find it pretty interesting, especially when they learn what industry and what sort of like, advanced technologies I worked with, and they're like, and you studied what? I'm like, yeah, yes. English with medieval studies. You can do anything that you put your mind to.
All right. So you work in manufacturing in the digital marketing space.
Yeah. I'm 26. So I've been in my career now we're coming out in over 5 years. I graduated a little bit early. So I consider myself in that awkward stage between I'm not quite a 9 to 5 newbie, but I'm also not like a veteran yet.
Right.
I'm pretty established, but I've still got a lot of things to learn. So that's why I always find my age is pretty helpful whenever talking about work, because I'm in that nice little middle ground.
Right around the quarter life crisis. So
yeah, I mean, I'm coming up on that midlife crisis soon, so you never know.
No, the quarter life crisis. Have you heard of this?
No.
It's like when you turn 25, it's like you have half of a midlife crisis where it's like you have like an identity question. It's like fresh out of college, you're finding your grounding, like all of that. It's called the quarter life crisis.
Well, if I graduated early, then maybe I'll just have mine a little bit later. So maybe it's coming this year.
That's how it counts. Well, good luck with that. We'll be here for you.
I didn't study math. Let's just put that out there. So don't ask me anything numbers related.
Well, fair enough. And talk to us a little bit about like your faith and a little bit about your faith journey, whatever you want to share with that.
Yeah. So the nutshell version. So I was raised in a Christian home. Parents are first generation believers. So I grew up in church, grew up in, nursery. I did all the things, or anyone who's familiar with, I just want to say church culture. I did all the things, Awanas, Bible quizzing.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole 9 yards. I've done them all.
Yeah.
Went to vacation Bible schools every summer. So it was very ingrained in my everyday life from a very young age. But as all teenagers or young adults, it can happen at different times for everybody. Mm-hmm. There eventually comes a point where you need to make your faith your own and not the faith that your parents, kept you in during your dependency years, you could say. And for me, that happened around 16. So right before I went off to college, I just kind of had I'm going to say like my moment of like, okay, am I going all in, or am I going to kind of just, walk away, because there's,
Go to
life is not
college.
without life is not without trials, absolutely. And don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, I still struggle sometimes when you think through, like, especially when tough seasons are there, you wonder, like, is God even real?
Yeah.
And that age range for me really kind of had to bring that into perspective on, okay, things are really rough right now. Is my answer to this solution going to be leaning into my faith and making my faith my own, or abandoning it and kind of, moving forward without it? And I went in the direction of embracing it. I got baptized right before I went back to college, and then kind of, the rest is history. I'm still here today. So
That's awesome. And how long have you been in your current position at work, or like
this
with this company and doing this thing?
one technically a year. I've
Okay.
worked with this company longer in other capacities, but I've worked in this particular position
Yeah.
for like almost a year now.
Yeah. That's awesome. And work from home? Are you
Yes,
work from home?
mostly.
Yes.
Our one of our
Mostly.
plants is
Okay.
in Charlotte, so I drive down every so often.
Okay.
But 9 times out of 10, you guys, everyone gets to see my home office and my favorite cat poster right behind me to motivate.
Those
To
just
hang
take
in
me
their cat
back.
poster.
Yeah, those just take me back to those like book fairs in elementary school that like you would
Yeah,
just buy those posters at. My
like,
my
it's a big
office is
poster. Yeah, it's a
my
big
office is a
poster.
little lackluster over here, which is like all white, but it'll get a makeover soon.
Yeah,
Um
I've got some.
so I kind of like to start this by asking, what's your typical week or day look like? Because I feel like it looks different, a little different for
Mhm.
everyone. Um, and how you integrate faith into that is also a little bit different.
Yeah. So I'm type A, so I love things to be the same, and I strive for consistency in my day-to-day life. So with it being work from home, it's wake up, make the treacherous journey from my bedroom to my office, and start the day. Um, I, try to find time to work out as well. And then within all of that, trying to find the uh time and, to be honest, sometimes motivation for like a
Yeah.
one-on-one with God, or because there's so much there's only so much time in the day, and it's like I find as I moved forward in my career, I found I had to wake up early and earlier
Mm-hmm.
to fit
Yeah.
everything in. um so I'm always the first to admit I'm not perfect. There are days that
Right.
I pick sleep, or I pick the gym, or I pick something else over God. And that's a process, but other than that, I said it's fairly consistent, just work. And then the evenings are where um like weekday church activities are. So like I'm involved in a church small group that's after hours. um Anytime they do like a church serving event, those are usually on the weekends. Sometimes after hours as well during the week, like if it's a children's event, like a festival or something.
Yeah.
So those randomize throughout the different weeks, but complex schedule, to
Yeah.
be honest with you.
Well, you were telling me before we hit record that you also have to wake up at some weird hours too to like talk to some international
Sometimes, yeah.
folks.
Yes, I work across all time zones. It can be that can be a fun time. Normally, they're pretty good at flexing, so I try to stay. I think the earliest I'll be willing to wake up for a meeting is 6 o'clock, but that has to be like drastic.
Yeah.
We can't find any other time.
Right. Yeah, we work with a team in Poland, and one of my coworkers who's in America was like, I'm
Mm,
just gonna pull an all-nighter just to get a work session in with our Poland team. And I was like, oh, more power to you,
mm-mm.
buddy. Like, I need my
Yeah,
sleep.
yeah. I can't do that often, but I will in a pit.
Right, right. Um, so what do you do to make sure that like your one-on-one time with God happens?
Yeah, and I think so. if you've been in the church, your idea of a one-on-one is probably, the first picture that comes to your mind is someone sitting in an armchair with, a
Yeah.
Bible and like reading something with a cup of coffee. And I think that's definitely one way of doing it. And that's what I strive for. I think that's where, the study of God's word is crucial.
Mhm.
But as I found that to be hard to do all the time.
Yeah.
For myself, especially since I do want to start the day with God versus ending. I'm more of a morning person than I'm a night person. So I know some people get around the whole waking up early by doing their Bible study at night. I've
Right.
tried it. I'm just, my brain is too bogged down from everything that I did throughout the day to really do that.
Yeah.
So what I've been trying to explore is, what does one-on-one time with God look like? And, I think that can be study. And, I'm in, several community Bible studies going through different books of the Bible. And so that aspect is very much there. But from a one-on-one perspective, that can be as much as, talking to God while you're frustrated with a coworker, or,
Yeah.
um, like, prayer is not exclusive to stillness. I think
Yeah.
that prayer should have some still quiet moments, but there's nothing in the rule book that says I can't, chat with God about my day while I'm getting dressed, or while
Right.
I'm, brushing my teeth or brushing my hair,
Right.
whatever it is. And so, especially as a young adult, if there's so many things that's vying for your time.
Mhm.
That's one way that I've tried to incorporate that one-on-one time with the Lord throughout the day is, just conversation, just talk.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like working from home adds like a different element to it too, because like depending on like how much space you have, like your bedroom might also be your office, might also
Mhm.
be, your workout gym, might also be,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
only do you wear different hats at your workspace, but like your space also might wear different hats. And I think like, I don't know,
Mhm.
for me, I am type A, but like I need like a space to really commune with God in.
Mhm.
And so like having my office at home
Yeah.
eliminates one of my spaces. So definitely throws
Yes.
it for a loop.
Yes, it's also and so I live with my sister, so we're both adults, as well as my parents, so I have a very full house. And so
Yeah.
sometimes I think the quietness, if I want something like that, then I have to go somewhere else to
Yeah.
kind of, I've gone to coffee shops to, just sometimes just to sit on one of their couches and read. Like,
Right.
and I can be sort of easily distracted. So as I'm reading something, I'll think of something. I'm like, that. And then before you know it, I've somehow transitioned from, the book of John to what I'm doing in 4 weeks.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
Yes to all of that. Just
yeah,
as a reminder for those listening, we are all imperfect. Ju-
we
just a news
are.
alert. We all fail and fall short of the glory of
Yeah.
God. Um,
Oh, yeah.
so thinking
Absolutely.
about like your work day, how how does God kind of intersect or show up in like your regular work, whether it's like with coworkers or with just
Hmm.
how you treat people or what have you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say that the feedback that I've received on myself is that I'm an abnormally nice person.
Mm,
Um, which and this has been throughout, I think I've been in 4 jobs since I graduated college. And a lot of them have always mentioned I have a um noticeable, genuine love for people.
mm,
Which is an interesting comment because I'm very introverted. So like, I wouldn't consider myself like uh I'm not a huge people person. I like my
right.
alone time. Like it's, but um, you know, from from the non-religious standpoint that my coworkers come from, what I interpret that as what they're seeing is, God's biggest commandment is to love others.
Right.
And and I fall short. Like, gossip is a real big problem in every company
Yeah.
that I've worked at, and I've fallen into it just like everyone else. But even within the flaws overall, when I talk to someone, I try to remember, that they're still made in the image of God, that, they are loved by Him, and I should try my absolute hardest to see them the same way that God does. I failed at it, I know
Yeah.
I have, but that is probably, I think, the most noticeable thing that you can do when trying to stand out as a Christian is how you treat other people
Yeah.
in the workplace.
Yeah. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head when it's like what they see in you as positivity or easy to get along with
Hmm.
or a really kind person. Like we know it's
Yeah.
God. We know Jesus is showing up. Like we have this light. And I think that's like, I think we as like a culture
Hmm.
have more of a way of thinking like we have to say something or do something to, show up for God. It's
Hmm.
like, no, like God's gonna show up whether he wants to or not. Like it is our job to be like the vessels and to be like the easiest thing we can do is to like be a nice person and treat people
Yeah.
with kindness.
Well, you'd be amazed, like, what people catch up on that,
Mhm.
you're not even trying. And
Right.
it's just like God's God's love can come through even if you're not telling someone. I'm not walking through my office saying, "Hey, God loves you and He loves you." Like, I don't
Right.
I don't do that. Like, I don't think I've even, I don't even think I've mentioned my faith. But what tends to happen and what has happened in a lot of my um different jobs is that my coworkers will pick up on something, and then that usually spurs a conversation.
Mhm.
um like, I think when I worked, like, before my 9 to 5, when I worked in fast casual food
Mhm.
to pay for my college, I had one coworker ask, like, "Why don't you swear?" Because I worked in a kitchen,
Mhm. Yeah.
there's unfortunately a lot of cursing in the restaurant business.
Right.
And that just that comment alone provided me an opportunity to talk about why I think
Wow.
why
Yeah.
I believe what comes out of my mouth matters.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even something that said I wasn't trying to do anything. It was more so
Right.
just how I acted because of what I believe about God carried over into, was noticed, and then
Yeah.
it eventually drove them crazy as to why it wasn't changing, and then they just asked me. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like there's um, we're supposed to show Jesus and Jesus is kind of
Mhm.
countercultural. And I think that makes
Mhm.
people curious when we're acting in a way that is probably different from the norm or from
Mhm.
what the rest of the herd is doing, right? Like we kind of stand out in that way. And I think that that's like a really good example of like standing out in
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And, once again, I know you mentioned it earlier, like, we all fall short, we're all imperfect. Like,
Right.
if my family listened to this, they'd be like, well, I happen to know that Eden was, made a mistake in this area in a
Right.
conversation on the phone. And it does happen. Like, we're
Yeah.
not perfect. Like, I,
No.
I got mad at a
Yeah.
situation, last week, and I, probably didn't
Yeah.
deal with it as
I've
biblically as
been
I
in a
should. But
yelling fight with my coworkers,
yeah,
like, it
yeah.
happens, but
But
also
there's forgiveness.
yeah, there's forgiveness and also just, like, humanness and all of that.
Hmm.
I think it's also a chance for, like, Christians to show, like, their humility in the situation of,
Hmm.
like, once they acknowledge that they are wrong and that, like, there is forgiveness and, like, we should seek forgiveness from others, like, that there's
Yeah.
humility in that, because it's hard to go up to like a coworker and like apologize, right? Like it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I always felt
Yeah.
weird to like, I don't know, it's like guilt inducing, but it's also like, it's like,
Yeah.
here's my weakness, here's my shame. I'm acknowledging it in front of you, right?
I know that's a very big deal. I feel like at least within my work culture, it's a very, you show your best self.
Yeah.
Like I don't like to tell people when I'm having a bad week or if I'm struggling with, something personally that might be spilling into, my work day, and it's not fun. But I mean, as you mentioned, that sort of vulnerability is countercultural and a good
Mhm.
way of especially admitting wrong, which is something I'm horrible with. I like to think I'm right all the time. But it's really necessary
Yeah.
sometimes and a really good way of building trust with your coworkers
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. And I remember, oh gosh, I remember I was in a meeting, and I was in a meeting with other non-Christians, from as far as I know. Um, and there was a situation where I had forgotten someone's name, like someone I'd worked with like really frequently. I just like
Hmm.
blanked out on their name. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Like I totally could not place this name." And this person kind of snapped back at me and was like, you apologize too much, don't apologize. This whole idea of like women
Oh,
shouldn't
yeah,
apologize, and I'm like, no, like I
yeah.
am genuinely sorry that this person's name has escaped me, because like I want this person to feel
Hmm.
known and cared about and valued, and I want the other people, even they weren't even in the meeting, and I want the other people
Yeah,
in the meeting to know that I know and care about this person. Part of that is remembering a name. And I
yeah,
think that's like,
absolutely.
that was one situation I like had forgotten about that. But like you bringing that up, I was like, yeah, like, just apologizing sometimes, and it doesn't
Hmm.
have to be a bad thing, and it's okay to apologize. Even though some people say like
It is.
you don't need to apologize, be unapologetic. Sometimes it's okay to
Yeah.
apologize.
Well, I think what's important there, and I think you might have, like, you brought up a really good point of is, I believe that that person had the best of intentions. Like he
Right.
really, or he or she, I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't think you specified. Yeah, I think she brought up she had the best of intentions when saying like, you need to stop apologizing. Like it's okay, but she's looking at it potentially through a different lens
Yeah.
than we are as believers, and we need to also, as we're interacting, look at things through that, biblical lens. My dad had always told me that like scripture is kind of our benchmark for,
Mhm.
whether a thing is something is good or bad. Like what does the Bible say about it?
Yeah.
And so when you look at things through that lens, something as simple as like, God loves the sparrows. Why wouldn't you want me to try and remember somebody's name? Like you look at things
That too.
differently. You look
Yeah.
at things differently when you have that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And you hit on something earlier that like I want to come back to, because it's been something that's been like really heavy hitting for me, cuz like I guess in like high school I didn't think that gossip would be a problem outside of like teenage years. Like I didn't
Yeah.
think that the worst gossip I would ever encounter would be in the workplace.
Hmm.
So can you say like something more about that, and like I don't know how you combat it, or like how you kind of check yourself with that?
So my rule is do my absolute hardest to not say anything that I wouldn't tell to that person.
Mhm.
Um, I tend to be a little bit more bold in that area, so maybe I push the lines on that, but I am willing to tell them
Yeah.
if the opportunity is provided. But it's a really hard one because it's
Yeah.
so ingrained in our culture. And this is not even at work. This is at
Right.
churches. This is in everything.
Yeah.
Like gossip is a real problem, and I don't think, my generation at least gives it the I don't say the respect it deserves as like
The
incorrect.
weight,
Like it's
the weight
yeah,
it
thank you.
carries. Yeah.
Yeah. It because it's I it's not stealing, it's not
Right.
something, more drastic that more drastic sounding of the sins, but I do believe that it's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's so it's a really hard one. How I said
Mhm.
how I combat it is trying to, check myself when I'm talking to people and, would I say it to that person? But I fall short in this area quite a bit because,
I do too.
just within just within work politics, getting information is very helpful. And so
Yeah. Yeah, and
um
I think one of the lines that why gossip is so hard to not only define but also to kind of constrain and put within
mhm,
boundaries is like when you're stealing something from the supermarket, you're taking the piece of gum and you're leaving with it, right? Like it's
yeah.
very clear like what's happening where you hit on a good point of like office politics and like business and like
Mhm,
staying in the loop and like knowing what's going
mhm.
on. Where does that line blur? That's a hard
Exactly.
question to answer.
Exactly. Exactly. And I don't have the answer. I mean, if you
Yeah.
do, great. Please let me
Oh
know.
no, I
If
don't either.
anyone that's listening has the answer, let me
Right.
know.
Yeah.
Because it's still one that I struggle with because if I'm not in the loop, then I'm going to fall
Yeah.
majorly, like out of scope with a lot of my projects. So it's part of it is, trying to handle productivity.
Yeah.
But there I do think that there are lines, and I don't, and I think sometimes those lines move based on what that particular, conversation or, we'll say
Yeah.
piece of gossip is in reference to. If it's about a person versus like, a project team or like I don't know,
Yeah.
like it
I don't know the
really take it
answer
in
either.
strides. Yeah,
Hopefully as like we get more episodes under our belt, we'll like be able to like
yeah,
expand this topic a little bit more because like for me too, where I've ran into gossip and like you said, like I've fallen into it and have really struggled with it
hmm,
in the past is I guess like guarding myself against hurt and
hmm,
against like manipulation. And a lot
yeah,
of that is like done through gossip of like knowing which people act certain ways or will take advantage
hmm,
of people certain ways and and just being on guard on that. And so like
yeah,
that's where I've been put in situations where I'm like, yes, like I need to know what's going on because also I want to protect myself and I want to make sure I'm acting appropriately for the
yeah,
situation and not kind of have like have that attack on me in whatever way.
yeah. I mean, for me, it's partially a control issue. I have, I think that control issues almost come side by side with type A personalities,
Yes.
but like for me, knowing the information allows me to work around it. Like if I'm trying
Hmm.
to get something done, and, I've worked at big company, I've worked at a little company, and I've learned each one, you have to, navigate things differently to,
Yeah.
to get your job done. And so that information is in my head critical, but then there's also like at what point am I talking myself into something that I know is wrong? Like am I
Yeah.
trying to justify my behavior in order to, keep going with it if it's, truly not, not biblical? I don't have an
Right.
answer.
I
I
might
hate
need
saying
to.
something and just saying no answer.
Right. Yes, I agree. And also I'm like thinking to myself like, Paige, you should probably do some more research on this and I probably will. And I hope to have many people on like yourself who can speak to it because I just I was really naive entering the
Mhm.
workforce of how prevalent it was. Like, sure,
Yeah,
don't steal from your company. Right? Like treat
it's a
people
good start.
nicely. Those are all really good
Yeah.
things, but also like where's the line of gossip and like
Hmm.
and how we can show the love of God through our actions in avoiding
Yeah.
gossip.
Yeah. One thing that I've always been really fired up about is I've always felt a gap in I'll say Christian education is that transition from college to the workforce. Like they're
Yeah.
so different, and then you're not even prepared for once you enter, like, oh my gosh, like what happened to my life,
Yeah.
like, being
Yeah.
surprised about gossip, like, oh, you think that that's like the teenage issue. No, I feel like it almost gets worse with adults.
Yes. Oh, it absolutely does. I don't think I dealt with this issue as much as I did in adulthood
I mean,
by any factor.
there are whole like Instagram channels at this point dedicated to like how people talk about things professionally, and basically, the whole like professional ways to say things. Like
Right.
there's almost a language to
Hmm.
being in business, and it's like
Yeah.
it nobody told you what it was going to be like. Well, they didn't tell me, at least. I won't say
I was
all
not
a
told.
rumor, but yeah, I mean, I graduated, and all of a sudden I went from like, yeah, I had time during the workday to, oh, I could be at the same place Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And then even then, 9 to 5 was sort of a lie, because then I was commuting at the time.
Yeah.
And then
Well,
coming
like
back.
also for clarity's sake, I say 9 to 5 because that's how most people recognize it. But like, no one works 9 to 5. It's 8 to 5. Where was that notice?
Yeah, it just subtly happened. And I mean, I was always doing that to begin with, because I liked to be productive before people got in.
Yeah.
But so I would always start just a little bit early. But then you just notice all of a sudden, yeah, people are coming in early, or
Yeah.
they're doing it's, yeah, 9 to 5 is not true. It's
No,
more
it's a
like 8 to 6
lie.
if you're driving. 7 to 6 if you're driving
That's
down
true.
into the city. Like, I mean, it can
Yeah.
take up a large chunk of your time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's crazy. Like, oh, 9 to 5, just 8 hours. No, and then it's somehow in between all the driving and the working, you have to somehow feed yourself. Like, I mean, how does that work? Like,
How does that
I'm
all
still
work?
figuring that one out.
Yeah, so very true. And like, yeah, no one gives you a heads up that this is coming down your way.
No,
So
but
if you're listening to this podcast, take this as your official warning. If you haven't entered the workforce yet, this is your official warning that this stuff does happen.
yeah,
A-
absolutely.
And I was thinking about it too, of like, we probably spend more time at work or with our coworkers than we do our actual family.
Oh yeah,
I haven't done the
hands
actual
down.
math on it. I'm a comms major like you, or I'm in comms like you, but
I gotcha. Yeah.
haven't done the math on it, and I don't know if I will. But like the sheer amount of time that we spend with our coworkers, and um it is kind of like a second
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. You spend a lot of time with them, and like where you work, that does influence you. Those
Yeah.
people have an influence on you. And I think that's, to me, as I kind of progress in my career and my faith, is why the importance of being in a church community outside of work.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm as a I'm 26. Like, I've talked to a lot of young professionals who are like, after work, I want to lay on the couch and I want to watch TV. And I said, I hear you, but it
Yeah.
is so important. It is so important to
Mm,
counterbalance all the people that you're hearing talking to on a day-to-day basis, with time with other believers who are struggling through the same things that you are, so you can encourage each other. And it is worth dragging yourself off the couch. And yes, sometimes you are going to drag yourself off the couch and
right.
complain the entire drive there.
Yeah.
But it's so important to prioritize that time with church community,
Yeah.
or Christian community. If
Hmm.
you're not in a church, but I mean, I highly recommend being in a church. I think that's not
Yeah.
only biblical but helpful for your soul.
Right.
um, because yeah, it's hard. Life working is hard. Like, and you need those people in your life to, encourage you, and bounce things off of, like, I had this happen at work. Was this wrong? Like, and then if you don't know, then work
Yeah.
through the problem together.
Yeah. And I think too, like, it provides like a level of accountability. I feel like the
Mhm.
more and more I am involved in and ingrained in my church and church community, like the more accountability I have, because even when you return to the volume, I'm like, okay, so I meet like
Mhm.
once on Sundays, and then like if I have a small group, it's like halfway in the week. Well,
Yep.
there's like not a whole lot of time to get up to mischief in between there. Like
Mhm.
it's easier to, kind of follow the straight and narrow when you're constantly being surrounded by this community that can keep you accountable.
And yeah, I mean, God has blessed us with technology, and that is a great way to keep in touch with your brothers and sisters in Christ throughout the week.
Yeah.
I know everybody hates group chats. I hate them as well,
Oh, I love
but
them. Oh my
uh,
gosh, I
I
love
can't.
group
No,
chats.
I know a lot of people who you add them to a group chat and they immediately mute you. They mute the
I love group chats. They're so much fun.
but they're fantastic for, like, dropping a prayer request throughout the
They
week,
are.
like,
Yeah.
telling your church family, like, hey, I'm having a really tough time this week with work, and y'all, take a moment to stop and pray for me, and vice versa, seeing what other people are struggling with throughout the week, and sometimes you may be able to support them within that, but you're never going to know. I always tell people I can't help you or offer help or anything if I don't know what the problem is.
Right. Yeah.
That's so always,
Yeah.
always, always good to
Yeah.
try and stay not just in a church community, but engaged in a church community throughout the
Right.
week. I think that's especially challenging for my generation, where I've seen it. I've seen it with the graduating classes that have come after me, where they're the biggest enemy against the church right now for my age range is the couch, honestly.
Mm,
um there is time. I know there's just they're battling um exhaustion, or
yeah.
just lack of motivation. Um and I mean, that's why I'm very passionate about emphasizing church community, because I think it has made a very big difference in keeping me, still a Christian,
Right.
still a Christian through, 4 or 5 different jobs where with questionable influences throughout the way. And
Yeah.
I would say my church community is a big reason for that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like your church community is a way of getting filled back up when you're pouring yourself out to your
Hmm.
coworkers and to your company and everything. Like you're not only like from an energy and like an intention, but also like spiritually, like there you might feel like work is a spiritual battle, and that like you have to actively fight
Hmm.
against things, or you might feel like that your coworkers are really, I don't want to say troublesome, but like are offering up situations that you don't want to find yourself in, and you're having to actively fight
Yeah.
against those, or you're just pouring yourself into some people who, you think that can, that God wants
Yeah.
you to be in their life with. And you're constantly pouring yourself out, in church community is your way of kind of getting filled back up too.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Eden, I always like to
Yes.
finish with this question. What is one thing that our listeners could take away from this conversation and like implement in their life today, of like what we're talking about? What is one thing that they can walk away with? They don't have to. I do this on every episode. So if you're listening to every episode, choose one, but give them one to choose,
One.
Eden.
Yeah, absolutely. I would give the same advice that my college pastor gave to me right before I went away to college, which was prioritize church on Sunday and prioritize multi-generational interaction with other believers.
Mm,
He said, and I said, I can't quite take credit for this, but honestly, it was one of the best things that I ever did in college and beyond. I
yeah,
still I still practice it today. He said, you're not going to really learn anything if you surround yourself by people who are, basically struggling alongside you. If I'm with a
yeah,
bunch of people who are 26, we're all going through the same things and nobody has the experience to help us get out of it.
Right.
So prioritizing church on Sunday, it's a good way to, obviously start your work week off with some Jesus and hopefully refresh your soul for the potentially treacherous week ahead. But also not isolating yourself within like, young professionals, or I think that sort of interaction is great, but find somebody younger and mentor them, find somebody older and have them disciple you. Like, it's church is a community, it should be a community.
Right.
And if it's not, then I would question some things about that church. But church should be something where you are walking alongside other people and doing life together and helping bear each other's burdens throughout the week. And I think that would be my two-part advice.
I love it. I love it, Eden. Thank you so much for joining us. This conversation was so good, and you have motivated me to go into my Bible and into the commentaries and do a lot more research. So where can people find you?
LinkedIn is probably the best way to find. Yeah, Eden Estabrook. My picture I think looks like me, so I would. There's not a lot of Eden Estabrooks out there, but I'm located in Charlotte, North Carolina. If you need to just verify the address, the city, but that's probably the best way. And feel free to message me on LinkedIn, or connect and then message. I don't know what regulations are around messaging people anymore, but happy to talk. I love meeting new people. So
awesome, Eden. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us. If you liked what you were listening to, make sure you subscribe and hit those 5 stars, and we'll catch you on the next episode.